So I'm going to first start this off talking about this because like I do a lot of Ruby programming, and there's this concept of service objects. And I had read a number of posts, because this is kind of how we thought about doing the show. I had read a number of posts talking about service objects and how bad they are, and they are an anti-pattern. Because basically OO is supposed to be, contain data as well as methods, and just having a class that all it does is methods is a little bit of an anti-pattern, because particularly they name things like so-and-so processor or so-and-so worker or something like that, whereas an object-oriented programming, you generally call something by an object. So it's, an email, or it's a, something, some object, and you attach methods to it. So I think I'm sharing my screen now. Do you need to flip the, okay. So like, this is a post, he talks about enough with service objects already, and this is related to Ruby. And you can tell that, and basically they've taken a segment of code, just processing code, and put it into a service object that's called IPN processor. And basically when you call it, you have to do IPM processor new, and then process the IPM. So it's a lot of redundancy and confusing using some of these service objects. So that's the first hint that maybe something's a bit fishy about it. Mm-hmm. So I have used this pattern in different places, and I actually like the cleanliness of just having, now I shouldn't say just classes, but certain objects, or just a collection of methods. Now, what he ultimately did is refactored and placed this into a module, and then placed essentially a self method here, so he can just call the percolator process IPN. So it's a much cleaner way to call it. But at the end of the day, he still just has a method in here that is not essentially as part of a class. So he calls it a public module level method. Now, why this kind of led down the functional programming route is because functional programming is essentially all about functions. And you don't store data in classes in functional programming. Now, if you're interested in a little bit more of the topic about this, they talk about service objects and talking about it being an anti-pattern in this as well. And essentially they created a user media rater. So when one of these posts said, anytime you have something ending in "er," it may be a sign you're trying to use a service object, and maybe you don't want to do that. But going back to object-oriented versus functional programming, they are not actually dedicated to specific languages, but they're more paradigms, as Bob Martin of the Clean Coder has commented on here. And you can see this post was from 2012. And he kind of mentioned 3 paradigms, and the 3 are listed here: functional programming, object-oriented programming, and structured programming. And if you look at this, the oldest one is functional programming from Lisp.
Look, if you make me learn COBOL again, I quit.
Yeah. Or Fortran. We could do Fortran.
Oh.
So now so basically it's not dedicated to languages. Like JavaScript can be written in a functional style, or it can be written in an object-oriented style, I believe. Same thing with Python. You could write it in a functional style or in an object-oriented style. So, but people who have used Ruby, they would say that's definitely more in the object-oriented camp. And I'm going to bring up Elixir, since that is the purest functional programming language I have experience with, is more of a pure functional programming. So I'm going to do some compare and contrast between them, and you can interrupt me as I'm doing this.
So the functional programming camp is kind of anti-service object.
Well, no. I mean, it's more like the service object because they're just pure functions.
Oh, so the way that people have been writing service objects, they say, is just an incorrect way of writing service objects.
Right. Calling it I think people have different terminology, but calling it a class, even in and of itself, and all you have are methods in it, is a bit confusing. Because again, you're calling it, it would be better to do it this way. Some people have called them classes and called them process classes. Basically, all they have is modules within it. But I think the service object thing is basically it does one thing. So you have a bunch of small files that have one method in them. And I really am bringing this up because people were saying this is an anti-pattern. And I'm like, but I love this. I love having something that just has methods in it. I mean, but that's for a very small minority of the methods in my application. The vast majority are classes that, of course, have data and methods associated with them.
Right. So they're not opposed to service objects as a concept. They're just opposed to how people are writing them.
Right. And I think if you call it a service object is a little bit of a loaded term, but I've heard terminology in terms of calling them process objects or something like that. I don't know.
Okay.
Or module level methods is another way, like they're demonstrating here.
Gotcha.
If you like this clip and want to watch another one, you can click right here. Or if you want to watch the full video, you can click here.